So then I had to really look at, well, what is marriage? And ask God to show me whether my views of what marriage was, and yeah, how, in terms of Christian marriage, legal marriage, what's God see as marriage from his perspective. And he had to change my thinking, quite seriously change my thinking over that whole issue, to free me even to actually release a frequency in the first place.
Just want to say thanks for making things simple and keeping things simple and about focusing on the Lord and relationship. Because occasionally, I listen to your stuff. I was listening to your stuff from the beginning of the year, and it makes so much sense and so much clarity. And I listened to other teachings and that, and I listened to one the other day. Just a short one popped up, and I thought, oh, I'll have a look at that. And they make it so complicated and so oh well, this is just the shallow stuff, and if you join up to the thing, the deeper stuff is on there. And I'm thinking, well, it's like they're trying to entice you in and keep it all hidden, and oh, it's only for the ones who's in the club, like. And I just want to say thanks for keeping it simple, because it's you feel like there's this burden of having to learn this and know that and do this and do that again, and it's not very helpful to me. It's helpful just focusing on relationship building. It's very, very helpful. And I do those activations every day and connect with the Lord, and it's wonderful. And I've learned to just relax in that and rest in that, and just, it's freedom, isn't it? It really, really is. They make
Yeah,
it so complicated.
it
It's
is.
just,
Because if you try and overcomplicate it and make it so deep, I don't understand
mm,
a lot of what people put out there, and
yeah.
I was in the US once, and someone gave me some books, his
Mhm.
books, and he's a very well-known sort of mystic. And I tried to read the books, and I just
Mm.
couldn't make head nor tail of them, and it was like, okay, yeah, I sort of get what you're saying, but what is the point of saying this? Or what are you trying to make it so deep that no one really will be able to understand it, and therefore no one will be able to attain to it because it is so complicated?
Yeah.
Quite a lot of things are protocol driven. Now, I know there are some protocols in the sense of, well, you can do this and this will happen. But generally, the relational perspective of engaging with God will open up the door to the mysteries that we may not be able to understand yet, but in a
Mm.
way that will make them relatable to us. And I do find that some things, it's almost like people seem to be explaining something in such a way that you need a PhD in mysticism even to get close to it. Whereas I think that can put many people off, and also people can feel inadequate because they say,
Mm.
well, I'm just never going to get this. Well,
Yeah.
it's not that complicated. Yes, there are levels of revelation that can go always bring us deeper into God, and we can get to know him deeper, and then that will open up our who we are in a deeper way. But it isn't so esoteric that it's mystical in a way which is mysterious in a in too much, because I think the mystical is just the intimate relational. That's really what it means. To have a mystic relationship means to have a relationship which is firsthand and experiential rather than theoretical and informational. So that's all it really means. It doesn't mean that we have to be weird.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
But
a bit weird anyway, but that's okay.
yeah,
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
you can
Well,
share
my
weird
friend,
stuff, and we can be unique
so,
and wonderfully made, but it doesn't have to be so cryptic that people
mm,
don't understand it, and therefore they don't understand us.
mm,
Because I think God wants us to be able to relate to him and other people in a way that demonstrates his love. And if you make it too complicated and so protocol driven that you have to ascend all these, it's almost like sort of the Eastern religious systems that you have to become some sort of ascended masters, you know.
yeah, definitely sounds
We're
that
all
way.
just the sort of the
Mm,
trainees that will never
mm,
really ascend to be in a saint. But actually, no, we're all sons of God. We're all his children, and God has uh, made us to be in relationship with him and to connect to creation through who we are. And we don't have to be like anybody else. So yeah, I try and keep it at a level which, yes, will intrigue people to a degree and draw them in, but isn't so unattainable that they can't engage it.
Mm.
Because also God will engage us all where we are.
Yeah, I love that you say about when you're talking to people about God, just introduce them to him and his love, and don't complicate that either, because that's so wonderful as well and freeing for people. I talk to people a lot because I
Mm,
talk a lot, and and I was at an art fair, and this guy comes up and he says to me, "Oh, I'm a pagan Wiccan something or other," and he shows me all his badges and his witchcraft book he's just got.
mm,
Well, I'm not worried about that stuff. I says, "Oh, that's cool." I says, I says, "I'm a follower of Jesus." I says, and then it popped in my mind to say I'm a mystic Christian. I never used that phrase in my life. I said, "We've got a lot in common, you know." He says, "People keep telling me, well, religious people, I should worship the creator and not the creation." I says, "You can do what the heck you like. God doesn't force anyone to worship him." And he shook my hand because he was so free of
mm,
condemnation. And we had a lovely conversation, and I just shared what we had in common, and God loves you. And
mm,
I don't know what will come of that, but they were so condemning as a group of Christians. And my friends, they've gone to this, well, they went to this festival at weekend, and it's just a secular one, and they just thought they'd go, and the Christians, you know, the believers, but they thought they'd go and check it out. And they was forwarding things to me. So, hey, Jew, you'd like this. They said they had their program, and they've got like the sound bass with singing bowls and playing the gong, and let's all rest and get love and peace. And I
mm.
thought, that's fantastic. They're so accepting of people too. That I said, if only there was a Christian version of that. I mean, it'd just be amazing. Introducing them to the love of God rather
Yeah.
than just one with the creation or whatever. Wouldn't that
Yeah.
be
I mean,
amazing?
I think it's a sense where we can engage them on their ground
Mm.
rather than expecting them to step onto our ground.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
we've made our ground through the whole religious thing inaccessible to them. They don't
definitely.
feel they're going to be accepted. So they would probably not
Yeah.
even come if it had a Christian title and they knew it was organized by Christians, they wouldn't come.
Oh, I didn't mean like that. I just meant for us to go to as
Yeah.
believers.
So going to
But
going
yeah,
to,
you
to
know, just to
them is the
encourage
best
each other.
way.
I'd love to
Going
go
to
to one of
engage,
them. Actually.
show
Mm.
them that we're not judgmental, that
Yeah.
we can talk about their experiences. I remember when I went to a couple of events which were, sort of healing type things that were new, Christians would have called them new agey. And I went the first year and in just walked around and talked to people. And then when I asked them, well, how do you know the source of the power you're using? And they were like, well, not really. What some of them were doing, like sound healing and different things. So I said, well, there's a source to this power. What you're tapping into, do you know it? And they said, well, no, not really. I said, would you like to know? And quite a few of them were, yeah, I would love to know. So, well, we've got a tent down the end of the field. If you go and just say that you've had a chat to me and you're just coming to be introduced to the source,
Mm.
then they'll help you. And so many of them came and they experienced God, and many of them were in tears because
Wow.
they found acceptance.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
weren't preached at, they weren't told that what they were doing is wrong. They were helped to meet with God and to meet with his love.
That's
And
wonderful.
and in talking to a lot of the stall holders and people who are running different healing things, you know, about 75% of them had been rejected by church
Oh, yeah.
because they didn't fit.
Mm.
And then they went to try something else because they just didn't feel that they could be who they were in that environment with all of these imposed rules and regulations and
Yeah.
restrictions that stopped them being themselves. So they lost sight of God and they went into the power and the other things, but without the person.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go around condemning people. I just went to talk to them and ask them, well, what were they doing and how did they do it? And did they know? And so many people were open to experience God. And then the second year, I got asked to come back and do a seminar on my experiences of God. You know, if I, the first year, if I had condemned them and I'd gone around telling them they were all wrong and they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, I wouldn't have been invited back. And we wouldn't have not had the opportunity then of introducing them to who God really is. So I did this seminar of sort of my mystic experiences, and I used their terminology, you know, to astral to planing and going into the astral planes and all of that. And I started off, said, look, I'm a Christian. I'm doing this from a perspective of God, but I want to apologize for any Christians who have offended you and made you feel that you weren't accepted and you weren't loved because of what you're doing. I want to apologize to you on their behalf because God is an inclusive God. He wants you to know him. So then I just went off and I shared my experiences, and they were like, you know, very few of them have had experiences. They're seeking experience, but they haven't really had them. So when you genuinely talk about real experiences, they're really interested. So again, at the end, I said, look, yeah, I know you might not talk about God in a personal way, or you might talk about a force or the universe or love in a sort of general way, but I can tell you that my experiences are based in knowing and having a relationship which is personal and intimate with God. And if you're interested in just seeing what love really is, then again, just come to our tent and people will help you. And they did, you know, and it was really interesting. Now, I'm not saying that everything in that thing was all good. Some things where you felt quite dark, and some things you felt were being manipulative, and people were using the ability to read people's body language, and they were telling them things, you know, that they thought they wanted to hear. And you know, some of it's just made, you know, that way, and some of it was quite dark, but most of it wasn't. And most of the people were open and interested to find out more when you introduced a real and shared, well, what this is what the Christian life should be.
Yeah, definitely.
Experiencing in this realm of encountering God and having experiences in the supernatural and in the spiritual dynamic of it that are not what you normally hear, because they're unlikely to find a mystic book. You know what I mean? That yes, there are some out there, but they're unlikely to find it because it's just not presented that way. So if you can really be just real and actually show that you care about those people because God does, and you're not there to convert them, and you're not there to try and, you know, condemn them, but you're there to help them see that there is a person that they can know behind a lot of what they're doing, then they're genuinely open. And what I certainly found was most people were seekers, but they hadn't found what they're looking for. And
Yeah.
that's where we can help them find what we're looking for. But I hadn't found what I was looking for either in Christianity,
No, I never found what I
in the
was looking
religious,
for. Either.
in the religious sense.
I knew there must be more all the
Yeah.
time. I knew there must be more. 10 years in the church system, knowing there's more than just going on a Sunday and just
Yeah,
crying out to God for where
absolutely.
is it? Where's
Yeah.
this more? Where's the
But you know,
reality of it?
we don't have to complicate it, and we don't have to
Mm,
make it a behavioral modification thing either.
mm,
It's like you're only going to be accepted by God if you do
yeah.
this and you do this and you do this. God loves them. He's already accepted them. They're already included. They just don't know it yet.
Good news of the gospel. That's
Yeah.
the good news, isn't it? It
It is.
really is good news when
It
you
is.
say it that way. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not been the other way. It's just horrendous. Like
Yeah.
beating people up and
Yeah.
making them feel condemned and Oh,
Yep.
you've got to believe, or else, oh dear, I can't
Yeah.
stand it. I can't stand it.
Yeah. No, I don't.
Oh,
I can't either. You know, and I
oh,
understand that people are doing that because they think that's the right
yeah.
way of doing it. And they're not deliberately trying to misrepresent God, but they are misrepresenting God, unfortunately. And I know, a lot of evangelism and the training and equipping for evangelism is quite manipulative in that you're trying to get to a person when they're vulnerable or when they're in need. Oh, they'll be open to God when they're in need. That might be true, but actually, does that carry integrity? That we're more interested in because they might be open rather than the fact that they're suffering or they're hurting or they're in pain, and actually helping them should be more important than trying to manipulate them into, oh, well, God can help you because, well, you're suffering. Of course he can, but actually, is that the reason we want them to turn to God? Or do we want them to find love and peace and joy, and to experience God, in reality, not just, oh, well, you're in a need. I'm going to pray for you in that need. And it's like the techniques that I was taught and other people were taught in evangelism techniques, I just felt were manipulative and
Mm,
weren't genuine. You know, do I genuinely care for that person and want the best for that person? Because they will ultimately know that. And if it's almost like, oh, well, I've done my bit, I've shared my bit, and if you're not interested, I'm moving on. Well, God doesn't move on. God, love never fails, love never gives up. And I think some people, well, I've shared the gospel with them. If they're not interested, I'm going to shake the dust off my feet and move off. Using the Bible to completely change the meaning of what that was.
yeah.
Actually shaking the dust off their feet was a term that the rabbis used because if you walk so close to the rabbi that you had your dust on him, that means that you had received from him because you were close to him. Then what you left behind was the deposit of what he taught you. So what Jesus was saying there is actually leave a deposit of my love in this place. Don't condemn them because they've not
Oh,
received you.
mm,
Shake the dust of what I have taught you so that remains there as a deposit for them to experience. But of course, Christians turn that around. Oh, they're not interested. Just shake the dust off and move on.
mm,
That wasn't the meaning of that verse because they don't understand the culture and what it truly meant. And it was a positive, not a negative. Jesus was not telling them to be negative. He was telling them to be positive and always leave a deposit, even if they don't seem interested now. That deposit is going to be there. So tell them that they're loved and accepted, even if they don't but accept that now. That is still there for them, And so many people, well, if you don't believe, you're just going to go to hell then.
oh,
And it's just like, oh, and actually almost it feels like there was a bit of glee in there. Well, if you reject what I'm sharing with you, that's tough. You'll suffer in the end. And it's like,
pride and arrogance, isn't there?
yeah, and
When in that, it's
there's just
horrible.
not
It's
love in
horrible.
them.
No, no,
The
it's not.
gospel is
No,
good news, and it is about love.
mm, it is. That wasn't even my question. Anyway,
Well,
but it's good, isn't it? Well, we've got the
yeah,
space to just share it. So
yeah.
what I was interested in? Well, I've been practicing releasing the frequency of love to people in situations, and I've been like imagining them and releasing it and praying in tongues in my head or whatever, and just releasing love. And I felt a flow, in that. Um, and release I've been practicing that quite a lot just to pray for people in situations. And I heard you speaking on something because I don't just do the Engaging God program, I listen to all the other things because it's like thousands of videos out there to get through, so it's going to take me some time, so I can't remember which one it was, and you probably talked about everything we asked you about in the past somewhere. And you were saying you were talking about when you had that breakup with your wife, and you thought, well, that was it. And God says, no, don't be selfish. um, you could make somebody else happy. And you said something that really, really interested me. You said, so you did what you knew to do and you released a frequency. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, how did you do that? Because you didn't say how you did it. How do you release a frequency for, I don't know. I mean, I'm not married, I've got a husband. It's not because of that, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in
Mm.
releasing other things other than love or peace or joy. I get that, but how do you go about? Oh, and I've heard people talk about, overheard them and seen things, manifesting your reality. And I was in a shop one day,
Mm.
and the person I overheard them saying, "Oh, you need to manifest your new house or something." Everywhere I go, there seems to be this talk about non-believers
Mm.
manifesting your what you want, and I think is that like the counterfeit version? I don't even know how they would go about
Um,
doing that.
yeah, I mean, it's not counterfeit. It's just it is true.
Mm,
If you're believing for something, you can't be negative about it,
mm.
be double-minded about it. So you need to live in the reality that you've already got it. But then that's what Jesus said.
Yeah.
Pray, believing that you've received it, and you will receive it. So it's just, now, of course, out there, it can be very selfish. Well, I want a
Yeah.
bigger house, bigger car, better job, better this, better that, and the other. And it's like, okay, but actually, what is the reason for having something? Is it for it to be a blessing? So you can bless other people. It isn't purely selfish. Now, some of the, manifesting your reality is based in a selfishness and self-centeredness about having more and better and bigger. And ultimately, the principles might work, but actually it's not going to bring any joy or satisfaction because people can get a bigger house and bigger car and they can be no more happy and no more joyful in life. So it doesn't work because it's a manifestation of materialism. And materialism doesn't meet a spiritual need,
Mm,
just a temporary fix and plaster that you put on your life. So I'm not saying those people aren't onto something, but they're just separated from the real reality of it. And God, of course, wants to bless us so we can be a blessing. That's the key to it. There's always well, I receive so I can give. Yeah, not, well, great, I'm going to keep all this to myself and I'm going to have more and more and more and more, you know. But in terms of releasing a frequency, it's an intention for a particular purpose that you release as a frequency, because everything is frequency. Everything is vibrating at a particular frequency, whether it's solid matter, whether it's thoughts, whether it's intentions, whether it's desires, they're all frequency. They are energy. And if you intentionally want to connect with somebody that's aligned to God's heart and purpose for your life, then you can release that intention and desire, which will connect with somebody else. And that might be a spiritual connection. And that's what I did. When God spoke to me, about having another relationship, which I was not even, it wasn't even on my radar. I was like, I thought, I don't really want another relationship. It's like, I can live on my own very, very happily, you know, and I won't have the hassle of relationship, and all of that. And when God said that, I was a bit put out, well, what do you mean? How can I be selfish? What, just being content to live on my own with you? But then when he said that, it was like, oh, okay. And it changed my whole thinking towards it because I just wasn't thinking about being a blessing to anybody else or being able to make someone else happy and to love somebody else. So really, loving others like I'm loved by God, if I don't give that, well, then I'm being selfish because I'm keeping something which is so amazing to myself. So when I sort of accepted, okay, my thinking has changed, but how would I possibly find somebody? Because I didn't date since I was 16, so this is a long time ago. In fact, 50 years ago now. So it was like I didn't know what to do. And I was a bit like, okay, God, if you want me to find, have someone, well, give them to me then, and he said, what he said was, well, you know how to do it. You know how to connect. And I thought, yeah, I do. I do. And I was like, so it means I've got to do something then. I'm like, yeah. So I did. So it was like, okay, I'm going to release my intention, carrying the frequency of my desire to be able to bless someone and love someone and make them happy out into the spiritual atmosphere to connect with the person's spirit that was needing to be loved and
Right.
was out there, that God, and I'm not saying that there was only one person, potentially there could have been lots of people, and I'm not saying that there's only one right person, but I found the right person for me, and I drew and connected, and we eventually met, and there was I knew in my spirit that this was the person that I had connected to by releasing a desire and a frequency to connect with them. I just knew it. No, I didn't tell them that. They would have thought I was really weird on the first date to say, oh, you're here because I've drawn you by some spiritual frequency. You're like, oh, so I
Yeah.
didn't. That's not. I just talked about, hey, I'm here, and this is me, and how are you, and so. But within 10 minutes, we were down into the deep things of our lives, and it was like we could talk really easily about things which you wouldn't really shouldn't talk about on the first date. This wasn't really a date; it was just we're going to meet up,
Hmm.
but we were talking about things that you really weren't advised to talk about. Why I'm here, how did I get divorced, what happened, what's going on, whatever. And I knew how to engage my spirit with her spirit, even though she didn't know that that's what I was doing, but she soon felt it.
Mm.
She soon felt me, and she felt that I was engaging at a level that she'd not had engaged with before. So I put into practice what God had done with me. See, God had drawn me into first love, and he'd drawn me into my relationship and my origin in him, and truly unveiling. And that then opened up the door for me to do what in a relationship, what God had done for me. And I didn't think it possible that God could restore first love. I thought, well, I've done that. It's happened. I got hurt, and yeah, because we all do in the past. We're emotionally fragile when we're teenagers and whatever, and you first fall in love, and it's all hormones mixed in with it and all of that stuff. And we think that's what it is. And, I got hurt and I closed down emotionally and I didn't want to be hurt again, so I wasn't open. And God had to bring healing into my life and all of the things. But I never imagined he could restore my ability to have a first love relationship. And he did. And I fell in love.
Oh.
But I fell in love after I chose to love. And that was the difference. I wasn't just drawn physically or emotionally. I engaged first in the spirit. And when the second time we got together, we were sat by a lake, in a gardens, and we sat there and we were just captivated in a sense. And about 4 hours went by, and everyone else had gone, and we were virtually the only people left because we were just looking into each other's eyes and just focused. And I was able to look and see what was in her heart. And I saw some of the hurt and the pain and some of the caution and some of the through what had happened in her life. And at that moment, it was like I knew I had an opportunity of choosing to love her unconditionally, to create a safe environment for her to be able to blossom and to be able to love again and to be able to feel love again. And I chose to do it. Because that's what God chooses to do with us, and he chooses to love us. And I chose to love her unconditionally, you know, and I shared with her some of the things I saw, and I just thing. And she was very cautious. She didn't want to, but I thought, okay, I'm going to give her the time and the space. So I'm going to create an environment where I overshadow her with my spirit so that she can feel safe to come out of her fear and anxiety of relationships and what might happen. So I
Mm.
chose to love her because I know God chose to love me. He loved me in spite of me, in spite of anything. He chose to love me. And I thought, okay, this is how God has met with me. He's given me the opportunity to experience love. So I'm going to choose to love her. And then I engaged my spirit with her spirit, and it gave her the time to open up. And I fell in love. And then I had all the emotions of first love, really deep emotional connection and all of the sort of first love, like almost like I was a child again, like a teenager again, but without all the emotional baggage and without all of the hormonal drives. So it was purer in a sense. So I fell in love, and God restored my ability to have that first love. And I did all the things that God did with me. I opened my heart to her, the garden of my heart, so she would know. I opened my spirit to her, so she would sense the love and the reality of my desires. And she felt it. She didn't know what I was doing, but she said one day, "You're getting under my skin in a good way. What are you doing?" You know. So I said, "Well, I'm engaging your spirit. I'm engaging you at a level probably that no one's ever engaged with you before," because she'd never really had a relationship with someone who understood spiritual dynamics, and so it was very interesting to then mirror what God had done for me, taking me through the lacquer of the desire that I want to make you my own to the you are my treasured possession. And so everything that love really inspires was stirred in me because it had died in the previous relationship through not, I'm not blaming anybody, and but it had died, and, and I was not able to be myself in that relationship. Whereas all of a sudden I discovered my true self. So I discovered I am romantic and I am wanting to express love and words of affirmation and encouragement and all of that stuff, which just seemed to be not there before. And I thought it was me, that's just not me. But actually it wasn't. It is me. And, wanting to bless and wanting to serve and wanting to do nice things and wanting just a completely different dynamic, because now something had stirred and I guess awakened in me, who I really am, awakened, and I was able to share who I really am in a way which was pure, you know.
Wow.
But it started with, how do I connect with the right person or a person who I can love? So I released that desire, that intention, that frequency, and I then believed that that would connect with someone.
How long did that take?
Well, it initially, from God saying, initially, okay, I want you to find another relationship because you can love somebody and bless them. And that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to release this. Then it was like, well, okay, how am I going to meet them?
Mm.
And I didn't know how to do that, but I knew I'd release the frequency. So it was going to happen. I just didn't know how it was going to happen. And then God uh, opened the door for me to do that. So I was on Facebook and I was looking at one of our posts and just seeing some comments that have been made. And I saw an advert for a thing called Christian Connect. And it was a Christian sort of dating site. Now, I had never seen that before, and I'd never seen it since, ever. It was just like, it was that moment, and I didn't know what to do. It was like, but I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I felt something on it that
Yeah.
drew it. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just check it out. And I checked it out, and it was a bit like, okay, there's all these Christian people on there, profiles and this, that, and the other. I suppose, well, I better make a profile, and try. And I was honest, and because you can tell when people aren't honest, and but I didn't. And what God was wanting me to do was get out of my comfort zone because I didn't, I was uncomfortable about meeting people, women that I didn't know. And so I thought, well, okay, well, how does this work? So the thing works on you wave at someone if you're interested, and they might wave back. And then you can sort of then like someone if you like them, and they can like you back. Then you can get in touch and you can sort of see. So I was like, okay. So you scan through all, and I didn't want to go very far. I'm not wanting to travel to the ends of the UK to meet somebody. It's got to be someone that's actually close enough to be able to connect to. So I put a sort of 50, 60 mile radius of people that I would wanted to connect to. So, and I saw a few people that seemingly their profile was quite interesting and they looked okay. I mean, it's like you need to sort of like somebody,
Yes.
potentially, so, but it's not the first thing. The profile, I really read the profile and I wanted to get the essence of this profile. So there were about, I guess, two or three people that I thought, well, these are quite interesting. Maybe I'll just wave at them, you know, and then, but also there were quite a few people who waved at me or sent likes. Then I'm looking at their profile and I'm thinking, oh, I don't really feel it on this. So I'm just sort of, then it's, oh, I don't want to upset anybody, or I don't, what do you do? Do you sort of ignore it? I mean, I was like totally green at this whole thing. I didn't know how to do it. I thought, well, do you ignore it? And then I got myself in a pickle because then, three people sort of responded to me sending out likes. Well, oh no, what am I going to do now? There's three people. And they were all actually quite nice, you know. And I thought, oh, and then I got myself in a pickle because it's like, I thought, well, what do I do now? So I thought, well, okay, well, I better contact and said, look, well, can we just get together for a visit or a day or something and just check and just connect? So I met three people and I sort of traveled a little bit to do it, but I got out of my comfort zone and I knew immediately they weren't the right person, but I found that I could talk to them, and it was okay. And we had a meal with one and another meal, and it's like it was fine. But we both knew that it wasn't really the right thing, you know. So that got me out of my comfort zone. And then I thought, well, okay, where do I go now? So I thought, well, okay, I will look again. And then I looked and I saw two more profiles that I thought, oh, I didn't see these the first time around. And they weren't that far away. So I thought, okay. And that's how it happened. And so I contacted them and I said, look, I'm up around your area over the weekend. You know, is there a chance that we could just connect up? And one got back to me and we hooked up and that was it. And
Oh,
then,
brilliant.
and then two or three other people then came out and said, oh, yeah, well, we like you. I'm like, oh, it's too late now. It's like sorry. So I just took my profile off because
That's
I did,
brilliant. Yeah.
but then I connected, we got together and it just felt like this was the person that I'm connected to. And it's gone on from there, So God was at the heart of it, and I wanted to do things in a spiritual way, but also there's a practical thing you have to do. Now, I was
Yeah.
not comfortable with the dating thing. I wasn't comfortable with it. I wouldn't have done it myself. But when I saw Debbie's profile, it said on there, my guilty pleasure is Gogglebox. Well, I love Gogglebox. You know, it's like I
Don't
love
know
it.
what it
And I
is.
thought, no, this is a person who's honest
Yeah.
because she sort of said the reality of stuff. And I know a lot of other Christians wouldn't have put that on there. Like one lady, she put on her thing, well, I don't really watch TV, you know. And I thought, oh, okay. But and when I met her, she watches TV. You know, I only really watch the God channel, you know, and it's
Oh,
like, no, she didn't. But she was just trying to be spiritual, you know, and actually, no, just be real.
yeah.
So when
Yeah.
I saw, hey, this person's real, she's not afraid to put down, that really attracted me to her, you know, because it
Mm.
was like, no, I want someone who's real, you know, and we love sitting down watching stuff together and just being on the sofa and just cuddling and, you know, because both of us like that, you know, and so for me, that was something which was real, and I look for that, and it
That's
felt,
nice and non-religious. I
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah, and I was really open and honest about me, you
Yeah.
know, the stuff, and she was like intrigued, but didn't really understand anything I put on there, really, in terms of, you know, mystic stuff, because I was real, you know, and it was like, so she said, well, what's all this about? And she was like, so you don't really go to church? I says, well, not at present, because actually I've been involved in church, planting churches, leading churches for years, but actually God has drawn me into seeing that it's not just about the structure or the religious system of it. And so at the moment, no, but I'm not against people meeting together and fellowshipping together. So it was like we talked, you know, we discussed the things. So where there was things she wanted to ask me questions, I'm used to answering questions, aren't I? So it was very easy for me to answer questions related to what I'd shared, but I wanted to be real, you know. So it's quite interesting. You know, you sort of find God has a way, but you can't just sit there and do nothing.
Mm.
I did something spiritual and then I did something natural, but I felt God was behind it, directing me in it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think some people are just waiting for God to do this miracle and something just happens and they just sit there waiting for it. But there are things we can do as long as we're operating out of the heart of God, you know,
Yeah.
and that's really the story behind it. So yeah, you know, it was simply releasing an intention to connect.
Did you do that every day, or did you just do it once, like,
No, I just did
or
it
whenever?
once
Oh, right.
because
Oh,
it
it's
doesn't go
helpful.
away. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
energy just doesn't disappear. You know, it's
Yeah.
out there still vibrating, connecting. So it took me about 3 weeks to sort of get out of my comfort zone and think, well, I could meet people. And then within another week, you know, I'd found the right person, you know. So essentially, it wasn't a long process from me sort of deciding, okay, God, if you say so. And that was a bit what I was like to start with because I was uncomfortable. You know, but if you say so, I'm going to do what I know how to do, and then you're going to have to show me how to do the rest because
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known how to do it. But I've noticed when you do ask him things, I've
Yeah,
done that in the past, then circumstances come up, things happen in response, and you just know that
yeah,
this is an answer to the thing you was asking. And it's just really
absolutely.
interesting. And then you have to make a decision, don't you?
Yeah,
Do you go with it or do you not? Do you
yeah,
believe this is the answer to what you've been asking,
yeah.
or do you not? I'm sure I mess it up a lot, but
And
hey,
I always go on, does this carry the sort of frequency of God on it? Do I resonate with it? You know, and I felt so. And you know, and I've never seen that advertised ever again. It was a one-off, never seen it again. So I know that that was the moment that God gave me the opportunity.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? But wonderful.
It
I
is,
love that.
It's wonderful. Anyway,
Yeah, I love that.
all right.
That's really that's really good. Really, really, I'm sure that'll really help a lot of people because I am interested in a lot of things you say, and I think, oh, I thought, I wonder how that works out. So thanks for that. I've got a better understand. So it wasn't like something super mystical and she
Yeah.
just popped out of thin air one day, or you had a vision of this person, or so,
No, no,
there was
just
some practical outworking of it, which is really good. I'm glad to hear about that because it
yeah,
makes it
yeah, because I think
makes sense.
sometimes think it's more difficult than it is.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah,
for it to be effective, my desire and my intention had to be aligned to what God had shown me in his heart.
yeah,
That's what I released. It wasn't like, oh, I want to do this and I'm going to go. It was like, no, I'm responding from what God has revealed. And I know that my intentions and my desires are now coming from his desire for me. And
yeah.
that's really what gave me the peace to do it. Because I wouldn't have done it without God's intervention.
No,
I wouldn't have
but
done it because I just wasn't in that place to do it or even think I wanted to do it, but
yeah,
God had to get in there. And I think by saying I was selfish, I think he really challenged me because I felt, well, aggrieved. But how could you possibly say I'm being selfish for just being happy to be on my own? So it was almost the shock of it to say, oh, and then it was like, what do you mean? Then it was like, oh, I guess I am. I guess my thinking isn't right here. Probably because I was still hurt and still overcoming the emotional
mm,
feelings of, what I'd gone through, and so God had to come into that because I didn't want to otherwise I could have got into a pity party and got into, oh, poor me, and I suppose I'll just be on my own, and actually, and you could, because you can get into that. But
yeah,
God broke in before I got to that point. And I know a lot of people say, well, that was really quick, but it wasn't. It was a year, over a year after, you know, my, ex-wife told me she didn't want to be married anymore. And after she left, I wouldn't have even dreamt of doing anything while, there was still a possibility of restoration taking place. But no, she'd left, and I know God had basically told me this was not going to be restored. So then it was like, okay, I'm now on my own. So, you know, and we were legally separated. Now, some people think, well, what, you should have waited until you were divorced. And it was like, well, God didn't wait to tell me. He basically said to me, well, I don't consider you married anyway. You're not what I consider marriage, and what you had wasn't what I consider marriage at the end. So actually, see yourself the way I see you. Having a piece of paper is not what it's about. So then I had to really look at, well, what is marriage? And ask God to show me whether my views of what marriage was, and yeah, how, in terms of Christian marriage, legal marriage, what's God see as marriage from his perspective. And he had to change my thinking, quite seriously change my thinking over that whole issue to free me, even to actually release the frequency in the first place.
and it's
Because
been very healing, hasn't it? As
yeah,
well,
it
very
is
healing for you
the
both.
healing
So it's a real
process.
blessing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it,
Mm.
it brought me to a place where, genuinely, I thought, okay, I can hopefully make someone happy and love them. And obviously they could love me. But also then it also brought me to think, and also I want my ex-wife to also find love and to find the person who can make her happy. Because if I can't make her happy, then it's better that she has a relationship with someone who can make her happy. Now, that wasn't how I felt when she first told me. It was like I was hurt and I was, you know, in pain, and it was, sort of a loss, and grieving started to take place, and all those emotions of sometimes you feel angry and sometimes you feel betrayed, and all of those emotional things. And at that point, you just, I hadn't given up on possibility of restoration. But once God sort of really told me that actually, no, this is over and you need to let it go, then when God told me about a new relationship, I could then not think I didn't want my ex-wife to have a relationship and to find love and to find something for her. Because to be honest, she had the courage to actually end our relationship because I wouldn't have done. I would
Mm.
have just stayed in it, no matter how unhappy we might have been at a level. Because I
Well, that's
was
what you
very,
expect to do, isn't it? That's
I was
what people
very happy.
expect.
Yeah, I was very
Stick
happy
with
with my
people.
relationship with God, and I
Mm.
had an intimacy, and I was finding my needs in God were so strongly met that the lack of things I had in that relationship, I'd sort of okay, I just compensated with God. God had sort of overcome my lack of stuff in that relationship. So I hadn't really got to that point of like facing the fact that this wasn't really the relationship that God really had intended for me and for her. And
Yeah.
so it was then at that point, it was then that the door opened for then God to move me through into something. And then it was like, well, I can't hold stuff against her. I need to bless her and want her to find the best.
Mm.
So, it sort of is a process you have to work through.
And
And for
it'll be helpful to others. It'll be helpful to people because you've gone through that. It'll make you more approachable to people who are going through tough relationships and thinking guiltier that they have to stay with people and stay in relationships that aren't working and blah blah,
yeah,
you know.
I mean, it's not that I just gave up on it and it was like the first sign
Mm.
of trouble. It was like, oh, that's it, great, I'm just going to not bother anymore. I really wanted restoration and I
Mm.
really wanted it to work out. And in those few months where I really tried, and went through all those emotions and everything else, I wanted, and I tried, but it wasn't going to happen. And so I came around to the fact that, okay, it's not going to happen. And then it was like God's really, I think, affirmed to me, it's not going to happen. Therefore, you've got to let it go and you've got to stop being obstructive because I was being obstructive. I wasn't making it easy. I wasn't going to give in to divorce and I wasn't going to give in to separation. I wasn't going to I was like making it hard because I didn't want to let go of it. And then until God sort of said, let go of it, then it was like, okay, what does that now mean? I now have to be open to a separation and I legally do it and do everything I need and then tie up all the things. What does that mean financially? What does it mean? It's not an easy thing. You've got to go through it and work through it all. And there were times when I didn't find it very easy. And there were times when I was miserable and there were times when I was upset and there were times when I was angry and there were emotions involved, but they didn't last that long because I processed them, took them to God and say, well, what should I be feeling? And he says, there isn't a should with feelings. It's what you are feeling. You
Mm.
shouldn't have okay, well, this is what you should be feeling. You feel what you feel. It's how
True.
you handle the feelings that you have are the issue.
Yeah.
It's because you can't say, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. Well, I do. It's pointless saying to
Yeah.
someone, you shouldn't feel that way.
People
If
say
you
that
feel
though,
it,
don't
you
they?
feel it. Yeah, I know.
It's
And
like
you
you're a
feel what you
Christian, you should be
feel.
happy all the time.
But
Oh
you
God.
shouldn't let the emotions rule you and control you. You have to process your feelings, and I process them by taking it back to God, and taking it back to Him and saying, this is how I'm feeling, and what He said was, that's okay, but don't get stuck there.
Yeah.
So He brought a measure of healing and He began to restore and make me whole in those areas where I was feeling hurt and pain and rejection and all the other things you feel when you go through a breakup of a relationship. It was a genuine, emotional, difficult time. but God was with me all the way through it because I kept going to him with the emotions I was feeling. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling grief. I'm feeling loss. But he is there to help carry our griefs and sorrows if we allow him to. So I didn't allow the emotions to so weigh me down that I got bogged down in it all. I kept trying to process it. And my daughter, who was at home, she helped me as well, because if I was out of order, she would tell me. So she would like, no, you're out of order, Dad. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's like, you are. And I learned to actually realize that she could see when I was operating out of those emotions inappropriately. So she helped me come to terms with it, which was good, because having someone else to talk to is also good. No, God can help, but sometimes just vocalizing it with someone else just helps you get it off your chest and bring it out. And it did, and that's what happened. So it was a tumultuous turmoil of a time,
I'm
but
sure,
God
yeah.
was with me all the way through it, and he helped me to process and navigate through the emotional swamp, and find a way out, but not denying my emotions, but also not allowing my emotions to control me in a negative way. And therefore, I think whenever someone's going through something, we need to help them understand that it's okay to have an emotional response to a negative situation. Just don't let it, derail your future and keep you stuck in living in the past. So forgiveness and releasing, people, I had to do a lot of that, because it felt, well, this isn't fair. I don't deserve this, and actually, there's always two sides to a story. As much as what I felt, I had to honor and respect the feelings that my ex-wife felt. And she was unhappy, and I wasn't able to meet the needs that she felt she had. And it was like, okay, you know, how can I? Which is what I wanted to do. How can I? Can I? And God was like, no, you can't, because it just isn't going to work. And now I know that wasn't about the fact that I couldn't because of who I am. It wasn't, it was just our relationship was damaged to a degree that it wasn't going to work in that thing. Now I know God can restore anything, but actually sometimes I look and say, okay, God, did you ever intend this? And then it's like, oh no, that's not a question we should ask, because we're then looking at, okay, has my life been, completely out of sync? Well, no, because God works within our choices, and I felt in the beginning this was someone I could love. Now I was immature in it all, and we were both immature in it all and everything else. So it wasn't that there wasn't really possibility, but sometimes things happen and things get, mixed into it all, that just made it that this wasn't going to be restored, and I had to accept that. And once I did, then the healing process could start. And then I could choose to honestly forgive and want to bless, but it's a difficult for anybody who's going through that type of breakup or that type of thing that happens in life. It's not easy. And the worst thing that can happen is people around them, condemning them and whatever. And people didn't. It was people, because I didn't know what people would feel, and I had to be honest and tell people. Eventually, I respected the fact that, until my wife left, that I didn't want to in any way cause problems for her. So I didn't do anything other than our sort of close friends knew. But as soon as she left, it was like, no, I need to be honest about the situation. I need to tell people, and I just need to be real about the process that we've gone through. And it actually, as soon as I told people and told all the groups that I was involved with, that was hard. I spent a whole month telling all the groups, because it takes a month to get over all the groups. And repeating the same story over and over again and telling people was just like, oh, I just want this month to end, because it was like, oh, how many more times can you tell the same thing? But people were genuinely supportive and encouraging, and there was no condemnation. And I'm really thankful and grateful for people in that. And even the friends that we had, they stayed neutral. You know what I mean? They didn't favor
Yeah.
one side or the other. They didn't take sides. They didn't sort of cut me off because, they were my ex-wife's friends. They made it good. And I, again, thankful and appreciative of that, because they could have made it really difficult, and others could have made it really difficult, but they didn't, and I feel that was um so positive in the because you never know how people are going to react. But people reacted really well, and I'm grateful for that, and appreciate that a lot, because that set the thing then for going forward,
Yeah.
without carrying all the, if I'd received a lot of condemnation from people, and it would have been heavy, but I didn't. I felt genuinely, people felt people's love and felt people's care in it, which was really good, and it helped me a lot. Um,
Well, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. That's really good. It's nice to hear.
yeah,
It's time now.
yeah, that's fine.
That was
Sometimes,
good. I'll leave the other million
honestly,
questions for next time.
yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks, Mike. That's really, really nice to
Sorry
hear.
for
I
the
love
others that
hearing your
didn't get to
testimony.
any more questions. But sometimes, yeah, sometimes a subject comes up and it will potentially help other people, and
I'm
that's
sure.
really why I'm open to share things. I'm not here to
Yeah.
hide things, but
Mm.
I know, I don't want to share them, out of any wrong motive. But when it comes up, you feel okay, there's an opportunity of, you know, positively helping to see that it's not the end, that
Yeah.
it's got something for all of us beyond the hurt and pain of broken relationships and different situations, that God is in the restoring process, that he can still restore
Mm.
us, even if a relationship is not restorable. We're restorable, and
Yeah.
therefore he can bring us into a place where we're healed and whole, and can discover things that we never really knew before,
Yeah. And the
and
important thing, yeah.
that's what really helped. It helped that actually I'm not what people or might have said I am. Actually that area might have been suppressed in my life, but actually it's not dead. It is awakened, and now I can find what I'm really like, which, is different, from what I
Absolutely.
would have imagined. It's beyond what I could have imagined or thought,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
which is awesome. And God is beyond what we can imagine and think. He's better
Yeah.
than I could possibly think he is. And he always will go beyond any even limitations that I could think. There is no limitation with him. He's just always good and a God of love. So I appreciate that greatly. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.